Thank you so much, Amanda. It's great to be here, and thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is James. I'm a white man in his 40s with very short blonde hair and a gray shirt, and I am still learning how to use Zoom, so that's good. I will want to um, just mention before I start that I'm going to use some images in this presentation, which I will describe as I go, and all the images were generated using an AI model. My first image is a picture of a traffic jam on a highway with a traffic information sign above the highway saying traffic moving slowly for the next 4 interchanges. And this is an interesting example to me of thinking about what system theorists call information flows. And so when they started building these highway traffic information signs a couple decades ago, they didn't add any new roads and they didn't, add any new infrastructure really. All these signs did was change who has access to what information and when they have access to it. And just by changing who has access to this information and when, it allowed the system or the traffic to self-organize in a different way. People could choose different routes. They could, get off on an earlier off ramp. It just allowed a whole bunch of different people to make different decisions differently based on that information being available at a different time. Of course, all this changed once again. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my clicker here. All this changed again once everyone got smartphones, and this is a picture of a smartphone showing a map app on the dashboard of a car also stuck in a traffic jam. But once again, when we all started using smartphones, the way information changed, and who had access to information and when they had access to it changed. I've been thinking a lot about this in the context of the environment that I work in, which is a university. And in this image, there's a picture of a desk with a notepad on the desk that says communication plan, and it's overlooking a university campus. And I imagine someone sitting down at this desk who is in charge of the communications for the university. And you think about everything that someone in this role is dealing with, and it's a lot of competing demands. So there's all the student experience type stories that they need to cover, and they need to help support the fundraising, and there's just ongoing crisis management of whatever kind is happening. So somewhere in that list of things to communicate is supporting the research promotion and profile, or whatever it's called at this particular institution. And the observation is that that's one of many competing demands that is faced by anyone in a senior communications role. So often in universities, when we talk about communicating our research, we look for the big news story. And I'm showing an image of a very fantastical image of a kind of stereotypical sterile lab environment. And there's a woman scientist standing on the table with a smoking beaker as many scientists dance around in celebration of some supposed great discovery. And in universities, this is the kind of research that often receives the attention, that often gets shared the most, because it's big and it's breakthrough and it's interesting and it's going to change society, and it has all of those kind of features about it. But in reality, and those of you who have been involved in research in any capacity know, actual research maybe looks more like this picture. And this picture is the same lab and the same researchers, but it looks like it's in the middle of the night. There's strewn pizza, energy drinks, and coffee mugs, and everyone looks very sad and dejected and extremely tired, because this is very much how research goes in the real world. Real research is typically very specific and very granular and very incremental. we don't often make really massive, earth-shattering discoveries in any kind of research. Usually we're contributing to a body of knowledge in some granular way that hopefully moves the science forward in some way. And when you think about science being and research being specific, granular, and incremental, you ask, well, who cares? Like, who's really interested in that kind of research? And it's often other researchers, it's other associations and networks, it's policymakers, people who are writing reports, the knowledge users. And just by that, I mean anybody who might make some decisions differently or might do things differently if they had access to that information or to that knowledge. And broadly speaking, there's domains and disciplines. There's areas where, people are invested in a topic, in an issue for one reason or another. So when you think about who cares about research, who cares about research X, X representing the research, it's very often people who are already invested in the related issue or Y. And so the value and meaningfulness of research, of any research, really depends on how invested you already are in the issue that is being researched itself. And the challenge is that in large part, the kind of activity or the kind of research that is supported by university communications isn't the specific, small, granular, and incremental kind. So here I'm looking at a screenshot of an Excel database with text that is far too small for anyone to read. But this picture, and it's a list of citations of journal articles, research journal articles. And this goes back to a moment I had in, I guess, 2022, as I started indexing and cataloging the research publications for a faculty at my university, and realizing there was about 700 publications a year in this faculty. And of those 700 publications, ranging across, in this case, the health sciences and rehabilitation, what percentage of those publications received communication support? How many of them were discussed outside of the academic journal where they were published? And this has got us thinking about like ways to perhaps intervene or think about how can we systematically close the gap between the scientific progress that happens in research units. In my case, that's at a university, but research happens in many different kinds of institutions. How can we close the gap between that scientific progress and the communication support that researchers receive? And so our idea was, well, what if every research unit, what if every group of people doing research could have their own kind of virtual communications team that automatically shares new research with specific audiences as new research is undertaken? And this is the background to this project called Research Mesh, which is an attempt to create a platform that provides specialized communication for research departments, institutes, research centers, groups, networks, etc. And this is what it looks like. It's not earth-shattering, it's a form, but you can see that a user is able to create a login identity. They're able to talk about the research unit they work for, the institution they're a part of. There's a number of settings, which I'll talk about in a second. They can talk about the address, where they're located. They can add a couple ORCiD IDs, which are identifiers for research. And these identifiers help disambiguate one author from another. What you get out of the end of this is the platform generates, first of all, a newsletter. And so I'm showing a screenshot of what the newsletter looks like. It's branded in a kind of deep purple color. It's called the KIN report, because in this example, I'm using a newsletter from the School of Kinesiology at my university. There's an image of a notebook that's called the KIN report, sitting on a coffee table, looking out over a park in the summer. Everything you see in this newsletter was generated by artificial intelligence. The newsletter continues with some text that outlines a brief recap of the stories that are going to follow in this newsletter. The newsletter also generates a podcast version with complete transcript text that outlines the research that is covered in this issue. And each research article that is addressed in this issue is given this kind of curiosity prompting headline question, such as, what does breath holding do to your body during a sprint? Or do head impacts from a single season of soccer change a young boy's cognitive function? Then each article that has been showcased in this newsletter receives a kind of iconographic image. In this case, it's a picture of a purple heart and a brief description of the research activity. If you click on just about anything in this newsletter, it takes you directly to the full research article, unless you click on summary, in which case it generates a kind of one-page description of the research, really geared to asking, what does a person need to know beforehand to fully understand the research and the findings of the paper. I'm just showing another example from another story in this magazine. This is the article about head impacts during a season of soccer. There's a picture of a soccer ball. I think there's one more example here. There was a research article asking a question about what links a major sporting event's environmental goals with its surveillance of activists. And then finally, at the bottom of the email that it generates are all the things you would expect to find in an email, options to share it on social media, and the required address and unsubscribe features that are necessary for sending mass email campaigns. So what was kind of cool about that example is that the only input to that newsletter were simply the institutional details that this was a department at a university looking at kinesiology research, and those ORCiD IDs, which are those numbers that help identify one author from another author in the scientific literature. Everything else that needed to happen was done automatically by kind of robots and AI going off into the citation databases and the databases that contain all the journal article metadata and coalescing that into a newsletter. And it can be customized in various ways, such as the delivery date the newsletter is sent, the day it's sent, the citation format, the colors, the logo, the minimum number of articles to share in an issue, the maximum number of articles to share in an issue, as well as an inclusion criteria. And an administrator who's running this newsletter also receives this report, and I'm showing a screenshot of the administrator report for the newsletter that I showed earlier. And this provides a snapshot of whether or not a new issue will be sent on its scheduled routine based upon available articles. And then there's content previews of all of the AI-generated material that will be showing up in the upcoming issue. So we always have multiple humans in the loop who see what is coming and how things are generated. And as well, this administrator can also see that there are some articles coming up that will not be included in this issue because the maximum threshold has been reached. This will also say if there are an insufficient number of articles, it also will not publish, but it will let the admin know. And the final thing that this tool does, it organizes all of the metadata for those publications, or all of the citations for those publications, into just automated pages that can help research administrators forego the tedious work of trying to manually dig through databases to find publications and sorts it all by month for them. So this tool is in beta testing in about 30 instances across 15 organizations, from health and rehab to natural resource management to the harder STEM sciences. It adapts very well across use cases. But I want to put out the invitation that if you are working with or supporting a team of researchers, you would be welcome to get in touch, and I'd be happy to um, set you up with access if you'd like to join our beta testing team and just explore how it works in your instance and provide any feedback that you might have along the way. So I'm open to any questions or comments that might be.
Awesome, James. This is a really awesome platform. So I do see a question from Bonnie. So forgive me if you addressed this already. Um, what, if any, other products does this platform produce?
Um, so yeah, so it's all kind of all pretty much packaged in the shape of an email newsletter, which also powers a podcast, and that podcast can also be independent of the newsletter. And then it also powers that bibliographic management of citations.
Awesome. And so our next question is the subscriber list organization, is the subscriber list organized by organization, or is it there a global subscriber list for Research Mesh?
Yeah, it's organized by every single unique instance. So importantly, one of the things we were trying to do was to be able to help our research units reach very specific niche audiences. So if, for example, you think about a faculty of health science, there's maybe rehab, there's nursing, there might be occupational therapy, physical therapy, kinesiology. There can be so many subgroups within that. And so there's not really an audience for everything that's health sciences. It's too broad. So the inspiration or the impetus for this tool was to be able to say to nursing, okay, here is a newsletter about nursing for people who are invested in nursing research, for example. And so that is its own subscriber list that people can opt in or out of, specifically about those researchers in that group.
Awesome. So I actually had several questions because as you were showing this, I do several newsletters, and as a comm specialist, I do stuff related to this. I have several questions, James. The first one is, sorry, I have a dog behind me that is trying to push me off the seat too. I'm curious. So, with these AI generated newsletters, is there an ability, once the system has generated a newsletter, to go in and sort of maybe customize like the banner images, or, if a human sees something that, might need a little bit of tweaking, is there an ability to kind of go into like a content editor and sort of make adjustments?
Yes and no. So the no part is that it doesn't generate its own editing interface. And part of the reason was, well, part of the reason is like kind of our goal was to be as close to fully automated, human in the loop, but hands off the wheel as much as possible, just to be able to, create something that works at scale. But the yes part is it also uses open protocols to output everything that it generates. So, for instance, in the same way it creates an RSS feed to run a podcast, it creates a feed of all the article summaries, the images that it has generated. So an administrator could either take that as they're like a first pass, first draft that could be used in other sequences, but that feed is also interoperable. So you could pull that into a MailChimp or a campaign monitor or something like that, and then use your own interface to do other advanced customizations. And you would probably also want to do that if metrics were important in your work case or scenario, because that is a very fraught space with very big companies battling each other for determining what is and what is not determinable by whether someone opens an email or not. So Google and Apple and Meta all have a big war over this. It's just not worth our effort trying to create a product that plays in that space. So we're just much more focused on the content, uh, the content collation and creation, and then from there try to be as flexible as possible and how different people might use that in different use cases.
Awesome. That sounds really good. And then, so when you were showing that example, I really love the different elements that have been included in this AI generated newsletter. So I really liked the audio. That was awesome. And then I also really liked like the in this issue and just the general layout of how this has been produced. In terms of like, as you were producing this, what sort of went into how the different elements that were included? Was there sort of any sort of user research, or was this really as they were building the AI tool? What kind of went into like choosing the different sections?
Yeah, interestingly, this grew up as a knowledge mobilization, knowledge translation endeavor, but we worked very, very closely with our relevant communications colleagues, understanding that if it was going to work at the scale we wanted it to work for knowledge mobilization, we could not be going rogue against communications. Um, so very much in yeah, very much a lot of collaboration around the what can we do to make a viable comms product that an institution would be willing to see circulated, quote unquote, on its behalf. Um,
Mm.
and then a lot of it is evolving. So, I mean, this is a product in live development. And so, as we receive feedback and input from the people who are beta testing it in a range of different environments, we're still doing a lot of tweaking as to what is where, what goes where, what is the priority stack in terms of what a reader sees first, how much is that customizable, how much do we want to just maintain control of that template, all of those questions. And so, yeah, it's really good to work in a beta phase like this where you're not like rushing a product out, but working with people in the real world. At the end of the day, it only works if it works, right? So
Right.
it's about learning as we go.
Exactly. That's awesome. So we have a few more questions in the chat. So one question is, does it generate a prospective subscribers list based on ORCIDs of people working in the field of research?
Nope. It only uses a list of ORCiD IDs to define the researchers that the newsletter is going to follow. And it doesn't really know anything about the topic other than what is the research that these researchers conduct. Uh, so it doesn't do a perspective. It doesn't make a perspective list on that. No.
Okay. And so we have another question from Bonnie. So, really kind of expressing a lot of admiration for the tool. So, what is the error rate of the responses?
As in emails that are sent, that maybe I'm guessing error rate of responses.
Did you
Bonnie,
want
if you
to?
just want to add one more, is that like error rate in emails being sent or error rate in publications identified? There's a lot of ways it can go wrong. um, yeah, so yeah, I guess we could think about that in two phases. There's this application, this platform has to go to all these databases, it has to collect this metadata about the publications. The biggest challenge there is that the scientific publishing ecosystem is cobbled together and it's messy and it's not one holistic, streamlined thing. Data is strewn everywhere and you have to kind of corral it into one place. And sometimes that's difficult. And there's steps of that process which are difficult to automate, steps of that process which I don't know, even could have been automated without um, AI. So it's kind of a product that could not really exist until now, given the technology and where it's at. So the error rate on that side is, yeah, sometimes someone publishes something and it cannot identify enough metadata about that article in order to kind of give it the full treatment in the newsletter. That happens occasionally, um, just because a publisher hasn't added enough metadata to the item to let it work. And then error rates, I mean, in terms of sending emails, it's running its own independent the application is on Azure, so it's using the Microsoft digital infrastructure in order to power itself. It has its own email address that it sends from, so it's not relying on a third party, and the delivery success rate for that is terrific, in large part because it's a new address. It hasn't, the only people receiving things are people who have opted into it, so it doesn't have the kind of issues that can happen if an email has been like reported as spam by multiple receivers or something like that. So managing that side of the infrastructure is a whole other thing that we have learned a lot about as we go. But so far, so good.
Awesome. So
And
I
if you
don't
come
see.
across someone as you go through life who finds themselves looking for an opportunity to test a solution for sharing research, please feel free to share the opportunity with them. We're really happy to collaborate across institutions to try to up our game in sharing science.
Awesome.